Under the terrifying shadow of World War II in 1942, the streets of London were swallowed by darkness, with air raid alarms wailing incessantly. The whole city was steeped in fear and tension from the war. Yet, besides the war threat, a merciless serial killer, known as the Blackout Ripper, was lurking in the streets. He picked out and brutally murdered victims, casting an extra layer of horror over the already anxious London. His crimes didn't draw the global attention that Jack the Ripper's did. The times he lived in were dark and dangerous due to the war. His victims were murdered in a city under prolonged blackout and were almost forgotten. The darkness of the era not only concealed the war's cruelty but also his unspeakable crimes. Even though these murders were among London's most horrific, the clamor of war drowned them out, making them a little-known, terrifying chapter of that time. On the morning of February 9, 1942, a female corpse was discovered in an air raid shelter by an electrician. The victim's clothes were in disarray, and her head was tightly wrapped in a scarf. When the police arrived at the scene, the investigators found that the victim's shoes were severely worn. Near her body, there were scattered mortar fragments. They deduced that the woman had a fierce struggle with her attacker. Then, the unidentified assailant knocked her to the ground and strangled her. Perhaps with the intention of sexually assaulting the woman, the attacker lifted her skirt above her hips, pulled her underwear down to her knees, and exposed her right breast. Moreover, the investigators found some items dropped on the pavement outside the air raid shelter, including an empty handbag. However, they didn't find any fingerprints of the attacker on these items. On February 10th, the victim was identified as Evelyn Hamilton, a 41-year-old pharmacist. Due to the war, she faced financial difficulties. On February 8th, she quit her job and took a train to London. At 6:40 p.m., she told a friend she planned to go to Lincolnshire the next day for a pharmacy manager position. Shortly before midnight, she had a glass of white wine at a bar. A waitress saw her leave. Investigators believe that after leaving the bar in the early hours, an attacker approached and killed her. The autopsy showed no sexual assault, but her right breast had cuts and scratches, and her left eyebrow was cut. Before Hamilton was identified, at around 8:30 a.m. on February 10th, 2 meter readers found the door of 34-year-old Evelyn Oatley's apartment unlocked. They saw a messy room with bloodstains and called the police. Officers found Evelyn naked in bed in a blood-stained room. Her handbag was scattered and a bloodied razor blade and hair curlers lay nearby. The autopsy revealed she was strangled, with injuries to her mouth, chest, a 6-inch throat cut, and her right carotid artery severed. She had mutilation marks on her abdomen, genitals, and thighs, especially around the vagina, caused by a razor blade and can opener. The police found the killer's fingerprint on a bloodied can opener, but no match was found in the database, indicating the killer had no criminal record. Evelyn, a married woman, worked in a nightclub after the war started. Witnesses reported a young, mustached pilot with chestnut hair, about 5'8", approached Evelyn outside a restaurant late that night. A neighbor, possibly the last to see Evelyn alive, saw her enter the apartment staircase with a man at 11:40 p.m. She was woken by noises from Evelyn's room shortly after midnight, but didn't investigate. Margaret Florence Lowe, 43-year-old, was a widow. After her husband passed away, she gave up the family business, sent her daughter Barbara to a boarding school, and moved to London alone. There, she found a job as a cleaner and also started prostituting. Barbara visited her mother in London every 3 weekends by train. They would go to the cinema, visit landmarks, and chat about life. On February 13th, 3 days after Evelyn's murder, Barbara came to London as usual. But when she entered the apartment, a neighbor told her that Margaret hadn't been seen for 2 or 3 days, and a package outside her door remained undelivered. Barbara used her key to enter the apartment. In the bedroom, she found her mother strangled. She was lying on her back on the bed, legs spread and knees bent upward. Her stockings were knotted under her chin, and foam was around her nose and mouth. When the police arrived, they found the killer's fingerprint on a glass candlestick holder on the bedroom mantelpiece. There was also a glass and a half-drunk bottle of Hamerton's Oat Black beer. The forensic doctor commented that the injuries were horrific, caused by a savage sexual maniac driven by evil desires who inflicted terrible harm on the women. The autopsy revealed that the victim had been beaten all over and mutilated. Some injuries were inflicted while she was still alive. Even after death, her body was extensively cut and mutilated with tools like a razor blade, vegetable knife, dining knife, and poker. Her abdomen was opened, exposing internal organs, and there was a deep, large 10-inch wound near her right groin. A large serrated bread knife protruded from this wound. Based on these injuries, the killer was also responsible for Evelyn's death. According to neighbors, at 1:15 a.m. on February 11th, Margaret walked to her apartment with a client, who left a few hours later. On the afternoon of February 12th, Catherine Mulcahy, 25-year-old, was attacked. A man approached her on the street, and they chatted. Catherine decided to take him to her apartment for sexual services by taxi. After entering the apartment, the man undressed and lay on the bed, beckoning her, so she took off her clothes except for her boots. As she approached, he threw her to the ground, kneed her stomach violently, and choked her. Fortunately, Catherine didn't remove her sturdy boots. She kicked the man's stomach repeatedly, broke free when he fell, and screamed as she ran out of her apartment to a neighbor's house, managing to escape. Initially, Catherine wanted to report the assault to the police, but to stop her, the man dressed partially gave her £8, said politely, "Sorry, I think I've had too much to drink tonight," and grabbed his coat to flee. However, a strap that could identify him was left in Catherine's apartment, unnoticed by him. On the night of February 13th, 32-year-old Doris Chelnut, her husband, returned to their apartment. Noticing the bedroom door was locked, he suspected his wife was hiding something. His attempts to break in failed, so he called the police. An officer arrived, opened the door, and found Doris lying diagonally on the bed, naked, with her left hand between her legs. A stocking was tightly tied around her neck. Realizing the seriousness, the officer told Doris's husband not to enter the room. Around 8 p.m., investigators arrived and discovered Doris's jaw was broken. Her abdomen, genitals, left breast, and thighs were mutilated with a razor blade and knife. A piece of flesh below her left breast was cut off and placed on her thigh. 2 used condoms lay on the floor by the bed. A gold watch and about £5 were stolen from the apartment. The autopsy report stated Doris was strangled, with all injuries inflicted post-mortem. The forensic doctor noted the killer showed restraint when harming areas above the navel, but went wild on genitals and thighs. Doris, a part-time sex worker who occasionally worked the streets, would take clients when her hotel-owning husband stayed overnight. With 4 victims in a few days, investigators knew one killer was responsible, except Hamilton, whose injuries differed. Due to the war, the murders got little media coverage, and the killer was dubbed the Blackout Ripper. On the same day, February 13th, married Margaret Haywood was assaulted. A man with drinks and sandwiches approached her. As they strolled and chatted, he tried to take her into an air raid shelter. She felt offended and gave him a kiss, saying she wouldn't enter, but the man grew bolder, fondling her body. Haywood rebuked him, hit his wrists, and tried to leave. In response, he throttled her, pushed her to the door, and strangled her into unconsciousness, repeatedly mumbling, "You won't." As he rummaged through her handbag, a delivery man saw him. At the time, the delivery man, entering a nearby bar with drinks, saw a woman on the ground and a man searching her. He rushed over to scold the man and help Haywood. When Haywood regained consciousness, they went to the hospital and found a gas mask and backpack on the ground. On the way, they met a policeman, reported the incident, and handed over the items. Back at the police station, an investigator noticed the backpack had a Royal Air Force Regiment number. They contacted the RAF police and confirmed the gas mask and backpack belonged to Gordon Frederick Cummins. On the morning of February 14th, the police questioned Cummins about his activities. Cummins protested his innocence, claiming he had been drinking whiskey with a sergeant in a building, then took a taxi to a bar. He said he spoke with a woman there, but being drunk, couldn't recall their conversation. They walked in the street but returned to base immediately upon realizing he had violated the curfew. Cummins denied assaulting Haywood but expressed regret and offered compensation. When asked about the cuts and bruises on his left knuckles, Cummins claimed they were from maintaining an aircraft engine. However, the police remained suspicious and arrested him for serious assault. On February 15th, the police checked the logbook recording pilot's activities and found Cummins' entries for the days of the previous murders were in pencil, easily alterable, and incomplete, with no record of his return to base. Inquiry among Cummins' colleagues revealed a habit of vouching for each other, and that Cummins had been spending lavishly a week prior. Further investigation showed Cummins and another pilot often left via the fire exit after midnight and returned to base in the early hours. A search of Cummins' belongings uncovered items linked to the 4 victims of the Blackout killer, including Evelyn's cigarette case hidden in a small kitchen with a photo of Evelyn's mother. Bloodstains were found on the inside of a shirt and belt taken from his toolkit. Examination of the turn-up of Cummins' military trousers revealed traces of a unique brick dust mixture found in the air raid shelter where Hamilton's body was discovered. The police also matched Cummins' fingerprints on the can opener used to kill Evelyn and at 2 other crime scenes. The 2 surviving victims, Catherine and Haywood, were asked to identify their attacker. Catherine couldn't confirm, but Haywood immediately identified Cummins as her assailant. Cummins continued to deny the accusation, claiming Haywood was mistaken, and that another pilot had planted the gas mask at the attempted murder scene to frame him. On April 27, the trial of Cummins for the murder of Evelyn began. The prosecution highlighted the fingerprint evidence found at the crime scene. Fingerprint experts confirmed that the prints on the murder weapon matched Cummins. The forensic doctor testified that Evelyn died from throat cutting around 12:30 a.m. on the day her body was found. A witness stated that on the night of February 10th, he parted ways with Cummins outside a restaurant in a square, and Cummins didn't return as scheduled. In his defense, Cummins denied the murder charge, claiming he was with another woman that night and returned to his residence in the early hours. He also alleged that the police had coerced him during the interrogation, leading to his lies. On April 28th, after hearing the closing arguments and the judge's instructions, the jury began deliberating. The judge emphasized that the jury should determine Cummins' guilt based on the evidence, while considering both societal interests and the defendant's freedom. Eventually, the jury took only 35 minutes to reach a guilty verdict. Each juror avoided eye contact with Cummins as they returned to the courtroom. When the court clerk asked for their verdict, they replied, "Guilty of murder." When the verdict was read aloud, Cummins showed no emotion, though his wife was in tears. He was then asked if there were any legal reasons why the court shouldn't impose the death penalty. Cummins responded, "Sir, I am entirely innocent." He was formally sentenced to death by hanging. When pronouncing the sentence, the judge said, "Gordon Frederick Cummins, after a fair trial, you have been found guilty and charged with murder. As you know, the law only allows me to pronounce one sentence, which is to take you from this place to a legal prison and then to the place of execution, where your neck will be hanged until you are dead. May God have mercy on your soul." Cummins had no criminal record or history of violence before his arrest. Born in 1914 in New Earlswick, North Riding of Yorkshire, his father was a civil servant running a school for delinquent youths, and his mother was a housewife. From a wealthy family, he received a private education. Though academically average, he obtained a chemistry certificate at 16. At 18, he moved to Newcastle and worked as an industrial chemist before being fired. At 19, he worked in a leather finishing factory in Northamptonshire but was dismissed again for poor time management. He then took various temporary jobs. At 20, he moved to London and became a leather dresser in a clothing factory. He desired a noble lifestyle, frequented West End hotels and clubs, lied about being a bastard with an allowance, and imitated an Oxford accent, styling himself as the respectable Gordon Cummins. He often bragged about his sexual encounters with local women. In 1935, he was fired for letting his luxurious lifestyle affect his work. Later, he joined the Royal Air Force. During training, he was ambitious, but not popular with colleagues. In 1936, he met his wife. During World War II, he was assigned to multiple military bases, gaining flying experience. In 1942, he returned to London and began his murderous career. After conviction, Cummins awaited execution in the death cell. His appeal was rejected, and he became indifferent to his situation. On June 25th, before execution, he was given a glass of brandy to calm his nerve. Then he walked firmly to the scaffold without resistance, and the execution, lasting less than 2 minutes, was carried out.